So I'm just going to just go through a little bit of the housekeeping just before. So again, a few of us had different connection issues there, but hopefully we won't have anything in the future. And if we do, we'll work around it as we go along. So, and obviously just to notify you there, just the recording has started. So we're going to pop that on our website going forward. So everybody can view it back. So there might be still a lot of people out in the sunshine that want to watch it in the future. So that's absolutely perfect. So welcome everyone to Conversations of Impact. My name is Michaela Donegan, the Social Innovation and Impact Manager here at Social Impact Ireland. And my colleagues and teammates are all here working away in the background. So thank you to all of them for making this happen today. And delighted that all of you, our listeners, are here with us today, and all our brilliant panelists that are here for our lunchtime event. And before we actually go any further, it might be nice just to do a quick screenshot, just to have I'm going to change the view back again, just to do a screenshot for our website and all our socials going forward. We can just give a quick wave, and we'll take a few more pictures as we go along throughout the event. So it's just nice to have them going forward. So feel free, obviously, to eat away your lunch and to make yourself a nice cup of tea, coffee, whatever you enjoy for the next hour or so in our conversation. Today, we're going to discuss impact leadership within the area of social enterprise. So at Social Impact Ireland, we feel that a lot of the leaders in the social enterprise space currently, I suppose, don't recognise themselves as leaders, even though they may be the founder of a social enterprise and creating huge positive impact and positive change in our society. Today, we wish to remind ourselves about the importance of seeing ourselves as leaders in the space and the impact that people can have through leadership, the importance of role models, bias around seeing ourselves as leaders. And we'll also discuss the gap in diverse leadership. We're going to hold a poll as well around this event. So if there's any specific question that you'd like to be asked in this poll, just pop it in the Zoom chat at any stage throughout the event. The intention, I suppose, for this hour is to have an open discussion with our panel of speakers who are currently based around the Cork and Limerick area and have worked as far afield as Kenya, Uganda, Guatemala, and the UK. So lots of different variations there in the types of works that have been carried out. And feel free to tweet us on our Social Impact Ireland Twitter account using the hashtag Conversations of Impact. So in a few minutes, I'm going to introduce you to our 4 amazing panelists for today. So we have Breda O'Dwyer with us, who's the Director of the Centre for Economic and Entrepreneurial Development and Senior Lecturer in Entrepreneurial Learning and Practice at MTU. We have Craig Kelly, who's the President of the Ability Board. We've Dara Ford, the co-founder of the Ability Board and a job coach with COPE Foundation, and Dr. Robert Worrall, Director of Worrall Consultancy. So following on from our conversations, then we're going to have a 10-minute question and answer session. So feel free to pop in any questions that you have for our panelists throughout the event and just pop it into the chat and we'll get to them later. So I suppose, like all businesses, social enterprises have leaders. And today we want to focus on the impact leaders. We will endeavour just to unpack leadership styles, things that can be done to develop leadership, the difference between leader development and leadership development, and trying to put that ego aside for more impactful leadership. So without further ado, I'll just introduce you to our panelists. So welcome to Breda, to Craig, Dara and Robert, and thank you all so much for joining us here today. We very much appreciate your time. So Craig, actually, I might come to you first, if that's okay. Actually, sorry, I might ask you all individually just to introduce yourselves first. That'd be brilliant. So if you all just want to individually introduce yourselves, just a few sentences about your background.
I'd start. So,
Great, thanks.
So my name is Craig Kelly. I'm from Cork. I am 24 years old, and I am with Ability at Work since the last 3 to 4 years now.
Great. Thanks, Craig. And lucky for you heading off to Florida in a couple of days.
I know.
Lovely. Nice to have it. Look forward to. Dara, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'll go next. My name's Dara Ford, and I'm a job coach in Ability at Work in COPE Foundation. And what Ability at Work does is it tries to get people with different abilities into paid employment. So I helped the Ability Board setting themselves up as a social enterprise. So they want to give training to companies and make everything more accessible for people with different abilities.
Great, thanks, Dara. Breda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Breda Dwyer. So I lecture as part of my role, and the other part of my role is I have a centre of research called the Centre of Economic and Entrepreneurial Development. I was really always challenged and open to learning by looking how different minds come together. That's what stimulates me, that's what drives my curiosity. And on the basis of that, there's no one sector that I probably align the centre to. The idea is the more diverse, the more interdisciplinary, the better the learning. That's me.
Great. Thanks a million, Breda. Robert.
Oh, hi. It's funny you're calling me Robert because my mum used to call me Robert when I was in trouble.
I'm actually always conscious of that. You know, when people whether to use the shortened version.
So my name's Rob. I have a background in working in collaboration with various sectors as a kind of career background at international, national, and local level. For the past 10 years, I've been really focusing on leadership and leadership development. But I'm really interested in how you can get groups of leaders from different sectors to work together more effectively to enable collective impact. And on that, I'm really interested in leader development and leadership development and how they work together. So I make a distinction between them. And I'm also adjunct faculty at the Royal College of Surgeons, where I co-lead a new program in leading digital health transformation. And I'm also I've just kicked off 2 new place-based leadership development programs in Ireland as well. So that's me.
Great, thanks. We'll delve into a little bit more about that now in a few minutes. First of all, we might just come back to Craig just to go through. Maybe Craig, you might just tell us how you initially became the president of the Ability Board.
Yeah, so it was really the job coaches that kind of spoke about it first, and so they wanted us to become a board, so we make decisions for ourselves instead of them making decisions for us, because that's what it's all about. So we held an election, and we had to go out and campaign for ourselves. We had to make posters. I showed up with, I don't know, I think it was like a 10-foot poster of a picture of myself and t-shirts and everything. And I just did a speech about how I really feel about it, and I just got to be voted. So I was very proud of myself.
Brilliant. So it's obviously like it's quite a senior role, and would you have always seen yourself as a leader, Craig?
Yeah, I would say yeah, because I like the others look up to me and stuff all the time, like because we're part of a group, and
yeah.
I don't like, we all need to work together. Now some of us might understand differently to others, but in order to be leader for the group, we just all I need to work together with them. Not as a bossy leader. I wouldn't say I'm a bossy leader, but you know, I'm very involved with them, like changing up websites for big companies, and you know, everyone has a different opinion. What might seem easy to me would probably be a bit more difficult to the other person. So we all have that inclusion and our own opinion together.
Yeah, well, that's great. I suppose, would you think that like going by what you're saying there, you also have a positive impact on the other members? So what kind of like what would you think about that positive impact that you have?
I think the others look up to me and respect me, but I'm not a bossy leader, as I said. I want to be more of a role model. I know it's important that we all have to work as part of the team for this to work. We all have a part to play. As I said again, our group are all mixed abilities.
Okay.
So some people would have a better understanding than others, but everybody has a part to play. We need people with all abilities so we can stand up for people with abilities. Yeah, absolutely. That's well said. What has your social enterprise, like the Ability Board, what has that taught you, I suppose, about diverse leadership? I was a much different person before I became part of the Ability Board. I had been knocked down all my life and nobody expected anything from me. And to be honest, I didn't expect anything from myself. This time 2 years ago, I would have never been able to sit here and do this. My anxiety would have been too much because I had no confidence. When you were born with different abilities, people treat you like a child. Even when you were an adult, decisions are made for you all the time, so you never really get the chance or the confidence to make decisions for yourself. It took a lot of getting used to not only making decisions, but being in such an important role. I do see myself as a leader, and it's so important to me because I feel like I was born a leader, and I just don't want to give up on so many people, you know? Yeah, I suppose being in that position, you have all those people looking up to you on a daily basis. So it's so really good role models going on. But I suppose if anybody has any questions for Craig, just to pop them in the Zoom chat now, or you can tweet them using the hashtag Conversations of Impact. And we can come back to it again. So Dara, I might move on to you there. You might just tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Ability Board.
Thanks a million. Thanks for having us here as well. Myself and Craig are delighted to be speaking at this event. So I've been working in Cope Foundation for more than 20 years now, and the first 16 of these were spent working with people with severe to profound intellectual and physical disabilities. So that was 16 years of trying to come up with ways, you know, like methods and techniques of trying to decipher what people wanted. Because when a person is non-verbal, you need to be very creative in understanding what they're trying to say. And when I started working with people who could actually speak, I couldn't get over the fact that nobody was listening. And these people were saying that they wanted to be included and they wanted to be like everybody else. But outside of our small circle of staff in Ability at Work, I felt like the rest of the world wasn't listening. So in partnership with the people supported by Ability at Work, we came up with the concept of the Ability Board. So this project is unique, really, because our members are empowered to be the leaders of their social enterprise. And the whole ethos of the social enterprise is that it's completely person-centred. So the board were democratically elected by their peers. They're made up of a president, Craig, a vice president, a chairperson, and 7 other committee members. And they're educating employers and society, and they're challenging stereotypes and assumptions. Like lived experiences is implemented into our DNA, and that's exactly what the Ability Board is all about. Like true inclusion is a really tough goal, especially now when we could be facing another recession. Diverse representation took a notable step backwards during the last 2 recessions, and employment equality is at a real risk of becoming a casualty of the COVID-19 crisis. I believe most people want to be more inclusive, but they struggle either with understanding how to pursue this, or they're fearful of the risks in doing so. And that's why the Ability Board is so important now more than ever.
Yeah, brilliant. Like how important, I suppose you've kind of touched on it there, but how important do you feel that diverse leadership is within the social enterprise space?
Social enterprises by definition, are businesses that work to improve the lives of people, and their core objective is to achieve a social, societal, or environmental impact. They regularly work to support disadvantaged groups, but how can you hope to achieve success with these groups of people if you don't put them at the core of what you do? Like, you can't help them without giving them the power to help themselves. And social enterprises are all about challenging the status quo, and the way the sector approaches leadership shouldn't be any different. Social enterprises are up against legacies and inequality, underrepresentation, gender and race pay gaps, unconscious bias, and systemic inequality. And there's so many arguments in favour of diverse leadership. The most obvious example would be the power of lived experience. Having leaders who look like and have similar experiences to the people they serve fosters a sense of trust in the community that can lead to more lasting impacts. Leaders are needed from various backgrounds to attack the problem innovatively. Every member of the Ability Board have direct experience of the social issues they aim to address. Setting up a social enterprise turns your experiences of inequality or injustice into innovative solutions that you know work, driven by an authentic leadership. Experience of an issue or community make you an expert in that field, full stop, and that's something that nobody can argue against. When you benchmark social enterprises against other sectors, absolutely, we're doing great. Social enterprises are leaders in many ways when it comes to inclusion and diversity.
Yeah, like, would you think that there's still room for that improvement, I suppose, in the diverse leadership?
Yeah, definitely. Social enterprise leaders are more representative of the population, but I think the talent pool is still understated. Many social enterprises exist with a specific social mission to improve lives for socially excluded groups, ethnic minorities, and those with different abilities. But it's really important not to make assumptions about our success. And in fact, we should challenge our social enterprise community when it comes to inclusion. It's important for us all to give a platform to those without the means to express their voice. We need to identify diverse leaders with great potential and give them access to the resources, training, and mentorship needed to grow and succeed. And as the social enterprise community continues to grow and evolve in new ways, the importance of diversity in leadership must remain front and centre. Social enterprises can, and they do, leverage diversity to promote innovation in their policies and practices of work. And I think the Ability Board are a true working example of this. For an example, Ability at Work came up with the concept of the Ability Board, but in truth, the board ended up educating us. We believed our policies and practices were inclusive and diverse, but they really opened up our eyes to so much more. And despite the barriers they faced during all the lockdowns, they really have facilitated us to modify our policies and practices. And our service now is way better than it was 2 years ago.
Would you see yourself as a leader, I suppose, within the social enterprise space? Well,
I really do think that we're opening people's eyes about the potential of people with different abilities within the social enterprise model. And the aim is, our aim, let's say, in the Ability Board is for companies to be more confident in engaging with people of different abilities within their working environment, opening people's minds to the value of people with different abilities and how they can really contribute to our collective gain, creating true inclusive working environments. And I do feel that we are really tackling this issue. Like, inclusion is not just a word, and it's not tokenism, and it's not about image, it's not about fear, but it's really about respecting everyone, all as people, for who they are, and supporting them with equal access and resources, so that everyone has fairness of opportunity to be who they can be and not who we think that they should be. And this is the point we're striving to get across. It's really important that the Ability Board have their voices heard on issues that are important to them, to protect and promote their rights, have their views and wishes genuinely considered when decisions are being made about their lives, and they in turn then can advocate for their peers to have the same rights as them.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Sarah. That's brilliant.
Thanks for listening.
So to pop in any questions that you might have for Dara now into the Zoom chat, or send on a tweet, that'd be brilliant. Reid, I might thank you so much for joining us today. I might just bring you into the conversation now. So what kind of impact can leaders have through effective leadership, do you think, Breda?
I suppose I'm just listening to evidence of it there, and just having listened to Craig and Dara, you know, do you need to say any more? You're listening to these people and clearly we can see what they're doing. I think for me, you know, when you were talking about impact, if we can just allow somebody, one other person, to see their value in becoming a leader, that's it, that's enough. I think the impact is whereby it's our ability to enable others to see who they are. I think the impact isn't always, you know, isn't always immediate. And I think that's the difference sometimes with social issues that we're looking at. You know, it's not a quick fix where you can go out and make, you know, 24 queen cakes, sell them at €3 each and make a profit on a base. It's not like that with social issues. It takes a longer time, and therefore we have to be more committed as leaders in the space, and we have to be more aware that our impact is longitudinal. But the beauty of that is, and I suppose I live off the principle, Michaela, of a flip the coin all the time. So while on one side of the coin that can be frustrating, but the other side of the coin says it's much more sustainable. And again, using some of the words that are coming up there with Dara, you know, it is authentic, because when you have that purpose in your mind, that impact will be fundamentally sustainable, but more importantly, it will be diverse and it will impact different people along the way. And I suppose for us as well to understand that that impact, you know, it can be negative and it can be positive, but either or, again, two-sided coin, either or have a learning opportunity attached to them. So if I were to say to anything, for me, the greatest impact we can give as leaders is to stimulate your curiosity. Once we stimulate your ability to ask questions and to be curious, that the impact of that is endless, you know?
Yeah. Would you have any advice like on developing leadership skills?
How long have we got? You know, and you
in a short space of time.
You know, you talk about all these various different frameworks and models and paradigms, and we can quote them ad nauseum and at length, but really just get to know yourself, just get to know me. You know, I mean, if I want to be a leader, and we've heard the guys talk about role models, and you know, as Craig was talking, for some reason I flashed back to when I was 6. My mum had a small grocery shop at the time, and I stood on top of a butter box. People in the room wouldn't know what that was. It's effectively a timber box turned upside down. And I stood upon that, and I sold my first sliced pan at the time, and I undersold it. And I never did that again, by the way. But you know, from that point on, I was just given a sense of independence at that stage, you know, and my mother trusted me enough to be able to let me do that. And she didn't humiliate me and say, get off your box. She didn't do that, you know. She just said, oh, wow, wasn't that great? You had a bit of initiative there, go for it. No, I probably did the wrong thing because I was allowed to do it more and more. And I guess today, someone at 6 years of age doing that would have been, you know, you say, that's not fair. It's almost like child labor, but it wasn't, you know, it was very much me looking at that area of getting to know who I was. And as a leader, we'll be knocked off that box very often, you know. So we have to understand what it is, what do I want? And I think as well, Michaela, for me, all too often, if we're trying to look outside and we're looking into, if I'm trying to figure out what's going on in your head, I'm not in my head. And it's really important. It's something simple that I use a lot in this area when I lecture and I talk about it, but it's called something simple as mind my own business. And as long as I mind my own business, I'm in my headspace. And that allows me to engage with you in a much more, you know, intuitive way, and certainly in a much more impactful way. But for me, it really is getting to know who I am and understanding that everybody has the capacity to become a leader. We all have it within us. You have the story, are they born, are they made? They're neither. It's there. We've got the opportunity to become leaders. We choose to become leaders in certain situations and perhaps not in others. We can choose to onboard, offboard it whenever we want, but having that choice is great to know what I am as a leader. You know, I listen to Craig and say, and people are looking up to him, how wonderful that feels. And how wonderful to say 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been here, folks. Or well, maybe it was 4 years ago, I wouldn't have been here, you know. And to think that now you are. And look at what that's going to encourage somebody else to do. And I'm also listening to, you know, I suppose, you know, it's not going to happen for any of us, guys. We have to make it happen. So we have to look at what's going on around us and see where I want to be in that situation. And perhaps for some of us, you know, by virtue of the roles we may be having, it may be seen that we're very comfortable in being in that space as leaders. But I would actually, I work a lot with the work of Susan Cain, which talks about the quiet power. And I would actually be an introvert myself, and I'm quite comfortable to sit in my own silence and in my own thoughts and to develop them and scope them out. And yet I will find myself in situations where I might be talking to a large number of people in a room. And I can do that, but I'm doing that because I'm in touch with myself, you know, and yet I can feel excluded and I don't seem to be diverse. So diversity has a lot of definitions, but we won't go into that one now. So yeah, know yourself.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Susan Cain. Actually, I read that there a while ago. And yeah, it's a really interesting book. And I suppose it's...
Yeah, and I think she also talks about, you know, it's a lovely concept of what's in my suitcase.
Yeah.
You know, if you know, what do I have? If I was to bring what I want to bring with me, what's in my... And she talks about that. And in her suitcase, there was the love of reading, because that was how she got on. She loved to sit in the quiet and to read. And now she's a very active lawyer and she's talking in this whole space, you know, but it was true experience. And I think it was great to hear again, Dara and Greg talking about it. You know, never underestimate the power of any experience we have to develop and inform our leadership mindset. And that's exactly what Susan would talk about, you know, and you use that, and we may be quiet, we may be in the background, that doesn't mean we can't contribute, but we need to be quite innovative and entrepreneurial in how we do afford our contribution.
I suppose, but like previous, I would have seen in research, like in relation to, say, the three areas of ego growth, the impulse control, the interpersonal relationships, and maybe the conscious preoccupations. Like in relation to the ego side, like, would you feel that this plays a big part in the leadership space? And like, do we need to educate ourselves? Do we need to educate our egos?
Absolutely. And we need to get rid of some of the chips of our egos. And we need to, you know, ego, sometimes we see it as being always kind of a negative, and it's a kind of very judgmental term that can be used. And often we can be our own worst critic. We can have our own worst ego at play, and we allow it to take over our minds. And again, that's because I'm trying to judge myself according to how you're judging me. So I'm in your headspace, not mine. So your ego is taking over my ego, and there's a whole battle going on. It's very comfortable to understand, but I suppose ego is how I actually want to be perceived. It's how I take information and I use it to inform my decisions. And sometimes that ego can very much protect me, and sometimes that ego can make me very vulnerable, and sometimes that ego can present me in areas of drama. But whatever it is, it's to sit back, and I suppose again, it's perhaps a bit of the work with Susan, but maybe others, and just reflect on it. You know, if something happened and something took place and my ego took over, was that good or was it bad? And where was the learning that I would take from that? But certainly ego for me is how you take the information and how you use that to inform those decisions. You make them and then you're okay with them. And sometimes we're not, and that's okay, because you know what, at the end of the day, we're just human. You know, AI is coming out there, absolutely. Robots are out there, but they're informed by us, and that's all we are as humans.
So like, do we need to become more consciously aware and I suppose take ownership of our actions in our leadership roles?
I think that's true in any role, you know. I think that we do, and we also have to at times, maybe as a leader, step back and say, I'm sorry, you know, I might have done something and I thought it was the right thing to do at the right time, and perhaps my ego was at play at the time, and maybe I felt vulnerable and I felt being attacked, and I may have reacted in a way that didn't come across very leader-like, and own it and say, you know, I did that, but I'm owning it. And that's the important thing, because as a leader, it really is about me being grounded in my 2 feet. It's about me looking in the multiple mirrors of my life that I look at, because I can look at it with one hat on now in one role. I can look at it in another mirror with another role, with another hat on. And as I do, I just need to own what that space is. So for me, you know, always remember that in what we do and how we behave, we are somebody else's role model. Just as we had multiple role models in our career and in our lives to date, and those role models come in every shape and form. I guess for me, believe it or not, my nieces and nephews can often be my role models. I just absolutely love. I have a 6-year-old nephew, and his ability to just really be a rogue and really challenge you and always asking the questions why and wanting to know and flip the things up. And by the time he's finished, you know, he's mission accomplished. I'm exhausted, but he's got his questions answered, and I take heart from that and I learn from that. So I like to look at things through the eyes of a child, because within that I bring back what I suppose really what I started off with saying was like the sense of curiosity, but you know what, a bit of fun as well. A bit of fun, nothing wrong with it in leadership.
Yeah, I like that actually. Always, like, we're always someone else's role model. It's a nice one to remember going forward. Thanks a million, Breda. So if anybody has questions for Breda there, please pop them into the chat now, or contact us again on Twitter using the hashtag Conversations of Impact. Robert, I'm going to move, or I call you Rob, sorry, because I really don't. I've learned my lesson there.
It's more learning my lesson. If you call me Robert, I'm just pay attention even more. So make sure I'm fully awake.
So you might tell us a little bit of the difference between what you mentioned earlier, the leader development and leadership development.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I spent quite a number of years doing leadership development before I kind of really got to the grips with the difference between leader and leadership development. I started off in academia just because I was asked to talk about various roles I had, and in the end, I would turn up to a lecture room, and then the lecturer would basically leave for 2 hours and say, "There you are." And in the end, I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm not doing this out the good, you know, you're going to start paying me for it. And they did. And then eventually I kind of moved into academia. But at the time I was doing a PhD research on diversity and organizational performance. And then I kind of got more and more interested in how you lead and collaboration. And as a leader, I suppose, in the public sector, I had my successes, but I also had many failures. And I kind of got interested in, well, what makes you effective? How do you lead? And I got more and more interested in how do you improve things really at a local level, because top-down approaches in the UK at the time where I was based weren't working. And there was a realization that one of the things that we needed to do was not think about leading from one sector, but how we lead together, but how we work together at local place. So a place-based approach. So I shifted my focus to place-based leadership development. And within that, obviously, I did quite a lot of research. I was lucky to have access at the time to a number of place-based collaboratives. And I was working at the time for what was called the National School of Government, which is a civil service training college, but which also had a leadership and strategy unit, which I was part of. And as part of that, I started going to investigate some of these collaboratives and talking basically to the leaders. And I love what someone said before about their lived experience, because my idea was if you really wanted to get evidence, you had to look at these leaders' lived experience. And these were leaders from different sectors and at different levels. It was public, private, not-for-profit, even some politicians in the case of one of the collaboratives. And I looked at 3 of them, and they were based in the UK. And as part of my research, I started really thinking about, well, what is a leader? And what is leader development, and what is leadership, and what is leadership development, what's leadership development, and what's leadership training. And I think it was a guy called Day, an Australian academic, who wrote a paper about the difference between leader development and leadership development. And that really struck me as kind of fundamental to what I was looking at. And it's not that they're not both important, they are, but I think in my programs they kind of happen simultaneously, or it's kind of synchronicity, but they're very different beasts. So for me, leader development is the intrapersonal, so it's development of yourself. It's very much what Craig and Dara and Breda have been talking about, is looking at yourself, holding up a mirror to yourself and thinking about what your strengths are and your areas for development are, how you can grow. It's about your mindset, it's about your emotional intelligence, it's about all those factors and abilities. It's very much about the social side and social intelligence. It's all those areas, and that's really, really important. So that for me is from the inside out. But leadership is different. Leadership is something that you create by the way you work with other people. So leadership and leadership development is more of an outcome, and it's interpersonal. So that means that as a leader, when I'm leading, I'm leading because of how I'm working with people, not doing things to them. Now you can do things to them, tell people what to do as well, but that's command. So I also make a distinction between command, between management, and between leadership. That's not my model. That's a model by someone called Professor 𝐁𝐫𝐞𝐝, who I think was at Warwick University. And for me, it's very important when you're looking at something like what kind of challenges you're facing, that you face them and you think about, well, what can my individual impact be on this, and what could our collective impact be? And for most challenges, especially social challenges, they're pretty complex, and no one person has all the answers. But if we can work together, we're much more likely to succeed. So what have I done about this? Well, apart from being a bit of an anorak around research, I've spent the past, I suppose, 7 or 8 years working in various parts of the world where I've tried to help leaders work effectively together. One of the areas I've worked in very much is in Kenya. And the reason I ended up doing work in there was just because I bumped into someone in a swimming pool, and they were talking about transforming leaders, and I butted into a conversation and said, "Oh, you have to look at my work. It will be really helpful." And I ended up going to Kenya and doing a couple of pilots with an NGO called Dignity, which is the Danish Institute Against Torture, and they were looking at how do you reduce urban violence in Kenya. And I ended up doing a couple of pilots, and then once I'd finished the pilots, I ended up we collected lots of evidence through questionnaires and through the lived experience of the leaders themselves, very much in the same way that I'd tried to do my thesis. And we ended up designing a 3-year leadership development program called Place-Based Leadership Development, where we applied loads of these ideas and developed a framework for what other types of behaviors that effective place-based leaders need to exhibit to become effective leaders across a place or across a locality. So I've been working in those 2 places for about 6 or 7 years. In Kenya, what I'm really proud of is that we've moved on from just we did the 3-year program. It was independently evaluated. It was found to have been very impactful. We drew a lot on ideas of collective impact from places like the Stanford University, social innovation. We worked a lot with collaborative tools and methodologies like collaboratories, design thinking, etc. But at the same time, when we design these programs, because of the leader and leadership development, we offer people the opportunity to focus on themselves as a leader, but also to focus on the collective side as well. So we get them to actually look at some of the challenges they're facing, and they design responses to what they're facing, and then they go back out into the field. They try out their responses and their action plans, and they come back and report back. And what we find is that if leadership development becomes problem solving, then there's a reason for it and it's more effective. And in the Kenyan case, we moved on in 2020 to thinking about, well, how can we make this more sustainable, and how can we make it more impactful? And we realized 2 things. I couldn't keep going to Kenya doing these programs because it's not very cost efficient. And also we wanted people to own it locally. So what we did, we worked with the local NGO in Kenya, Midwest Human Rights Network, and we designed some pilots where we designed facilitator development programs for some of the leaders from these programs. And what we ended up, cut a very long story short, when lockdown happened, we had to rethink what we were doing, and we designed an online live and face-to-face, the kind of hybrid co-facilitator development program. And what this means is we've had 4 cohorts go for that. And what this means is we've now got people in about 4 or 5 different places in Kenya delivering place-based leadership development programs. So the great thing about that is, one, it's more sustainable, but the second thing that's really brilliant about that is we also brought in young people as co-facilitators, and we developed them as well. And they're going out now delivering place-based leadership development in a number of different places in the Midwest Valley, but also in the north of Kenya, where there are, you know, rural areas where there are very different challenges of violence they're trying to find ways of addressing, like cattle rustling and female genital mutilation. In the urban areas, it's more about domestic violence, crime, and other forms of violence. But what's nice, or what's great, is that we've also developed a facilitators guide to help these facilitators, and we've also developed a workbooks for both the co-facilitated development program and also the place-based leadership development program. And then more recently, I moved to Ireland in 2018, and I've been doing work in Ireland, initially with the Institute of Public Administration, but latterly through my own consultancy. And we're currently working with 2 areas, one in Darndale, in Dublin, in North Dublin, and one in County Louth, Drogheda, where we're also delivering place-based leadership development programs. And again, they're based on the same principle. And in between times, I've done bits of work in the UK, I've done work in Guatemala and also Uganda, but it was probably more developed in Kenya. So I'm really passionate about enabling leaders to really develop their own identity, assert their own identity, and also to deliberately explore what their values are. Because I think leader development, like Breda says, it can be quiet, it can be about being curious, but I think initially for me as well, it's also about intentional and deliberate practices. And through all the research we've done and the papers we've published and a lot of reflective work we've done, because we asked leaders to complete questionnaires several times during the programs. And what we've managed to do is we've managed to develop a set of 8 practices which we think are really important for facilitating these programs, but also for becoming an effective place-based leader. And these are things like, there are things that have already been said: working with people, not to people, things like creating a safe space, things like mutual accountability. And they're not like rocket science, but we think we have a strong evidence base, and we think we need to be much more explicit about this. And we think it's the only way. If we see leadership development as problem solving, then we design assessing impact and the impact of the leaders and their activities into the start of the program. We don't try and just deliver a leadership program and then at the end saying, oh, what's the impact been, when it's too late for me. So I guess in terms of impact, I think the impact has to be by drawing on people's lived experiences and understand, and we improve the programs by understanding what works and what does not work, by constantly asking the leaders, what's your experience been like? What was it like? Did we achieve these outcomes? What was good about this? What was not very good about this? It's quite intense, but it's also a fantastic way of kind of really, like Dara said, it's a way of teaching us what's working and what's not working. So I guess, sorry, that's probably more than answering your question. But I guess for me, it doesn't, for me as a leader, it doesn't matter what model you use. I think what it matters is that you are deliberate and intentional in being explicit in what your values are and how you work with people, and also what they can expect from you and what you expect from them. And you can do this far more easily if you are, as Breda said, really connected to yourself and really understand yourself. And that takes work on yourself. And I think if we understand the need for the outside in and the inside out, both, then it's more likely that we're going to make ourselves effective and also enable leaders, other people to become more effective. And also that being explicit, that builds your identity. So that's claiming agency, and that builds your identity as a leader. So I think that explicit, intentional, and deliberate are three things that I would say are really important for developing yourself as a leader and for encouraging people to develop themselves. Because if people really understand and start being explicit about their values and reflecting on them and discussing them, they get a greater appreciation of where they've come from, what shaped them, who they are, and what they've already achieved.
Yeah, Robert, thank you so much for, like, there was a huge amount in that. Like,
sorry.
No, that's exactly what we want. It's exactly what we want. Like, it's great. You gave us the distinguishing between the leader development and the leadership developments. That's really, it's great for everybody to hear that part, and brilliant to hear, like, this, you've huge passion there for the place-based leadership. So that was really interesting to hear about, and the 8 behaviors that you spoke about in relation to a leader. So thanks a million for that. If anybody out there has any questions for Rob, just to place them in the Zoom chat, or you can contact us again through Twitter using the hashtag Conversations of Impact. So hope everybody's enjoying our sunny lunchtime event so far. And at this stage, I'm going to just ask some collective questions, maybe to the panel members. So you can all just feel free to pop in and answer any questions as you feel appropriate or that you might want to take on. So there's just a few of them. Maybe do any of you still feel that there is a gap in diverse leadership out there?
I'll answer this one, if that's okay.
Thanks, Daria.
So as I said earlier, it's really important not to pat ourselves in the back too early, you know, and make assumptions about our successes. We should always be challenging ourselves without everything, but when it comes to inclusion and that includes diverse leadership, there are still big gaps there, all right? Like even for myself, I said earlier as well, I've been working with people with different abilities for 20 years. And to be honest, I thought I was the definition of inclusive and diverse until I worked with the Ability Board. And I was quite shocked at myself that I had the cheek to think that I didn't need any improving. At least now I have the good sense to know that I still have a long way to go. And to be honest, because I don't have the experience of this marginalised group, I might never be fully there, but I'm trying. And as long as I know that, and as long as I'm always putting myself forward to learn more, and I think we all need to do that, like even within the Ability Board, so they're quite a diverse group themselves. And Craig I think he might have mentioned this earlier, he might never fully understand what it's like to be in the other members' shoes and vice versa, because we've people with varying abilities, and they also are learning from each other as well. So Craig is learning from the people that he works with on the Ability Board, because each one of them has a valuable role to play, not despite of their varying abilities, but because of them. Like when we're reviewing websites, for example, something Craig might think is an absolute breeze, another member might struggle with. But as long as we all know that, and as long as we all know that we have to think a little bit further and not think, yeah, no, we're there now, we've got diverse leadership going on, we're absolutely there, as long as we know that we're not there ever. And I think we can really improve on ourselves going forward if we know that.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of what's come up before, like we're always growing and changing, isn't it, as we go along. But is there anybody out there that might want to maybe explain the differences between maybe being a manager and a leader? It did briefly come up in conversation there.
I think I don't mind having a go at that. So one way of looking at it is very much to think about the type of issues we face. Some of the issues we face are pretty critical. Like if there's a threat to an organization or the life of an organization or even human life, what we don't want someone sitting there being deliberative. We want someone to take charge, and then we need a commander. And that is one form of leadership, but it's not the only form. If it's more of a situation where there's a HR issue, or there's something else or something that needs to be implemented, a process or something, then, or we need a budget planning or things like that. That's the realm of management, and that's just quite, they're often quite tame problems, and then, or issues. But if it's where it's a complex problem, where it's multifaceted, where there's where we're not even sure of all the causes, we're not even sure of all the impacts, we're not even sure of, we don't even have all the knowledge, and all of us are expert maybe in part of it, then that's a complex problem, and that's where you need leadership. You need to be asking more questions. Now the challenge is that sometimes issues evolve over time, and they move from being tame to being critical. You know, it's for example, I think it's really important that we really ask the type of problems we're facing at any one time, and then say, well, what's the type of leadership we need? Is it something we can manage? And also, I think we often prefer to use management because that gives us a sense of control, when often we don't always have control. And I like to think that effective leaders can become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And part of that is where I think leadership is about letting go and saying, I don't have all the answers. I don't even know all the causes of this issue. I've got some experience, but you've probably got more experience than me. If we work together on these issues, it's more likely that we're going to be effective than working alone and having individual impact. So we're only going to resolve this if we work together. And that takes leadership. That's about working together. That's about being collaborative. That's about empowering. That's about doing things with people. And that's a massive difference between that and for me, management, which I think is much more about, control, process, doing things in a certain way. Now we need all three. We need command, management, and leadership. I'm not saying they're not all important, but I think we do need to distinguish and clearly define them and think about what do we need at any one given time. And I think there is more and more issues are becoming more and more complex. I think it's much more about leadership, and it's about that leadership which is about working with and not doing things to people. It's about empowering, it's about enabling, it's about listening as well. For me, if there was one skill that I would say that I as a leader didn't display for many years and was not very good at, and that was listening. And I think listening is probably the most underrated leadership skill out, and I think it's something that we don't practice enough. And I'd put myself in that category. I think I'm probably a bit better now, but I think I'd put myself in that category as well. And I think I really like Breda's term about quiet leadership as well, because I think the view of what strong leaders is traditional is not the type of leader that we need now. I think strong leadership and presence is not about being, it's not a male model, it's more, or a male image. For me, it's more about that leader who's there, listening, is attentive, shows they value people, shows presence in that way. That for me is the type of leader we need.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And I love that you've added in that letting go piece, because I think that's really important. Again, just another question for you all there. What would you feel are the biases around people viewing themselves as leaders?
Am I okay to answer this?
Do, brilliant. Thanks, Craig. Yeah.
I spent my whole life being put down. People had zero expectations about me, and because of that, I had zero expectations of myself. This is happening to so many people. If I haven't had the experience on the ability board, and if I wasn't given the opportunity to be leader, I would have never thought of myself as a leader. I feel now I'm almost born a leader, as I said earlier, and I'm sure there's so many people out there just like me, but they're not given the chance or the opportunity that I have had.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, that's very powerful. Thank you. I suppose more than ever, leaders, I suppose, must not only take on the responsibility now for all the technical pieces, the technical content and of their role and leading teams. I suppose all that part, like for peak performance and goal achievement, all those parts. But I suppose we've spoken already about impact leader behaviours, but what would people on the panel note as the core, I suppose, impact leader qualities? And it might be a nice piece for the audience if you want to join in the Zoom, in the chat there, that if you wanted to post your answers in relation to what you see as the core impact leadership qualities.
I could maybe just contribute a bit there, I suppose, in that, Michaela, just to say
Thanks,
that, yeah, you know, when you look at it, there are multiple, but we've heard the word authentic being mentioned a few times. To me, you've got to be credible, you know, and people have to see that, you know, what's, you know, the writing's on the tin, what you see it is in the tin type of thing, and you're consistent. I think also fundamentally as leaders, and I think maybe concept, we won't get into it now, but I think an interesting concept, yes, between leadership and management, but perhaps looking at the leading manager might be something to look at some other time. But I think that notion of, do I have that passion within me? Am I credible? Do I know my own values? Am I working with an organization in a context that those values align to my values? Am I in a situation whereby as I've said earlier on, I ask those questions, but really as leaders, we've got to be really comfortable with change. And I think any of us who work in the space of social, and specifically looking at social impact, it is dealing with change. And when we have change, we have fear. And when we have fear, we have deep emotion. And when we have deep emotion, we're looking for someone to guide us through that emotion. And I think fundamentally for me, a leader has to be comfortable in a space of transformation. And they have to be comfortable with understanding that it's a co-creative process, and it's about empowering others and stimulating that curiosity with others and letting them shine. And together we shine brighter. But for me, fundamentally, it really is about that sense of being true to yourself and being credible. And I think my last contribution on that really is, and I believe in it as well, and I mentioned it briefly earlier, but that aspect of the critical friend. When we're looking for direction, and when we're given direction, and when we're guiding others, you know, sometimes if we're doing it because it's the way we want to do it, and that's the way it is, or if we're asking someone for an opinion on how that's being done, and someone goes, well, you know, if I were you, I would do this, and if you were there, well, you're not me, you know, and the way you do it is not how I do it, and that goes back to my business. So what we have to look at is, you know, in that area of building up that quality of leaders is to fundamentally, again, going back to knowing who I am. And it is being that critical friend who does, and someone's put it in there in the chat form, you ask questions. But by asking the questions, the beauty is you're letting the other person make the answers. You're giving them the ownership and you're empowering them. That would be my conclusion on that aspect.
Great. Thank you, Breda. Very informative for everybody here, all our listeners here today. I suppose I'm just conscious now of time coming up to the end of the event, and we're just going to move on to the questions and answers that have kind of come in from all our listeners here today. So I'm just going to run through, if I can, any of the questions and put them out to the panel members. I'm just going to go through bits here. So I have a question for Craig. What is the most important aspect of leadership? Someone has asked. Craig, I don't know if you're comfortable in answering that one. So that someone's just asking what's the most important aspect. Sorry, I missed that, Craig.
What was the question again?
Oh yeah, sorry. The question that's come in is for you is what is the most important aspect of leadership for you?
Oh, for me, I think it would be just like, you know, really engaging with the others that you're working with.
Yeah. So the rest of the team in the ability board.
Yeah, so like just being with them, engaging with them, like not telling them what to do, but working with them together, having each other's opinions. Like that would be my kind of answer, like, you know.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Craig. Another question that's come in is, what are the key behaviors for being an inclusive leader? And that's for Dara. The key behaviors of an inclusive leader.
As I said earlier as well, I think an inclusive leader has been there. I think it's great if they've been there, if they're the person who, if like the Ability Board, for example, like Craig, the Ability Board is there to help people with different abilities find employment and to educate employers and society. I think it's very important that the leader of that group needs to have, so the president of the Ability Board needs to be a person with a different ability as well. Like, how can we also give disability awareness training to companies, and we used to do it as with the staff of Ability at Work. But sure, the cheek of us going in giving disability awareness training to employers, we've absolutely no idea. We can give facts and we can give statistics and we can work off some of the experience we do have, but what about the experience of a person with a different ability? That is so much more important than anything that we would be teaching people in disability awareness training. And I think that's a huge thing. And I hope I haven't gone off topic now, but have I?
That's perfect. That's perfect, Dara. I'm sure the person will come back to us if you haven't answered. Another one that's come in is leaders of impact have a positive mindset, and it's natural to have negative emotions from time to time. How best would the panelists approach these times? So the leaders of impact have positive mindset, and it's natural to have negative emotions. How best would anybody on the panel approach times like that?
I think sorry, go ahead, Robin.
No, go ahead, Breda. It's fine.
No, I think to me, again, it's quite natural for that to happen, you know, and I suppose what we need to try and avoid in that sense is being impulsive, and just step back and reflect and say, okay, so what is the situation? And always to remember there's learning in the negative as there is in the positive. You know, so for me, it is stepping back, and it is reflecting on it, and it's again asking the questions and finding out the why. And Simon Sinek is a huge believer in the why, and keep pushing that. And when you get to the answer, or when you get to the why, then you start to build up the learning from that. So absolutely, but again, I suppose by doing that, the passion or the resilience is evident, because you know we're trying to find a way of what was the issue. But again, for me, the two sided coin.
Yeah. I suppose we're very close to the 2 o'clock mark, and I do understand that a lot of people, panelists, have to head away for other meetings ahead. So that's the questions that we have for today. And thank you so much for everybody for joining us here for the lunchtime event. And feel free to contact us at Social Impact Ireland, where we'd be happy to help you with any of your social enterprise queries. We provide incubator programs, short courses, one-to-one business advice clinics, and lots of other things throughout the year. So we also have an online platform called Closer, which was built specifically for the social enterprise space. And feel free to join that through our website, which is socialimpactireland.ie, and you can link in with other like-minded social entrepreneurs and businesses. I suppose, as mentioned at the beginning, this is part 3 of a series of 6. So please do join us next time, which our topic will be about people, all those people behind the social enterprises, the founders, the staff, the volunteers, and all those people that make and enable social enterprise to exist and thrive. So thank you all so much for joining us here today, especially our 4 panelists. And we hope that you're going to be able to join us again next month. So thanks a million, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Enjoy the sunshine. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye. Bye.